then there was some greats that were just real disciplined.
Yeah.
Marvin Hagler's my best example for that. When I was a kid growing up in Boston, Hagler was the middleweight champion of the world. They used to have video of him running. They played it on the news. He was running on the sand dunes in Cape Cod in the winter, freezing cold, with a hoodie on, running, screaming, "War! War!"
Crazy, man.
Oh, it was amazing. Marvin Hagler made you want to just get out of your house and go running in the snow. You know, he was so disciplined. That was the thing that I always got out of watching him. Wasn't that he was so wild. He was so mentally strong. He had an iron chin, and his discipline was impeccable.
I just saw that he was being outboxed by a guy who was a slugger, a guy who was a puncher. And I'm sitting there, and I said, I can do this, I can do this. I really believe that. I really believe that.
I mean, Hagler was a beast.
Oh, Hagler hadn't lost a fight in 11 consecutive years. And I went into the training camp. I trained for a year and a half for the whole fight. And I'm scared, and I'm nervous. I'm like this. Because, training is one thing, but in a real fight, actual fight, it's a whole thing.
I got H-U-R-T written in my mind. That means I'm going to destruct and destroy. I realize now what they want to see. Every championship fight, they want to see a knockout. They want to see somebody knocked down. They want to see somebody beat up. So, hey, they're talking to Marvin Hagler. They're talking to the right man.
What kind of middleweight makes champions feel hunted instead of competitive? Thomas Hearns once admitted that no opponent ever forced him to abandon his plan faster than Marvin Hagler. Roberto Duran called him a machine, not as praise, but as warning. Even Sugar Ray Leonard, the most strategic mind of his generation, prepared for Hagler with a kind of caution he rarely showed anyone else. These were not men who feared easily. They had faced punchers, technicians, legends. Yet when Hagler's name appeared on the contract, something shifted. He did not sell fights with noise. He did not charm audiences with smiles. There were no theatrical entrances, no playful taunts. What he brought into the ring was something colder. A stare that did not blink. A pace that did not slow. A pressure that did not ask for permission. For nearly 7 years, the middleweight division did not revolve around Marvin Hagler. It belonged to him. 3 successful title defenses became 5, then 10, then 12. Challengers entered with confidence and left with doubt. Not always knocked out, but altered. Something about sharing the ring with him forced adjustments that other champions never demanded. He fought southpaw, then orthodox, sometimes within the same exchange. He absorbed punches without reaction. He cut off the ring as if shrinking it, and the most unsettling part was this. He never appeared emotional. Not angry. Not desperate. Just committed. So who was Marvin Hagler really? And why did even the boldest men prepare for him differently, knowing that when the bell rang, there would be no relief, no rhythm to settle into, and no space to breathe? Marvin Hagler did not arrive in boxing with a spotlight. He arrived with a grievance. In 1976, while the Olympic Games crowned new American heroes, Hagler was not among them. He had been denied a place on the team under circumstances that still remain debated. For some fighters, that would have been disappointment. For Hagler, it became direction. If the system would not validate him, he would outwork it. He turned professional without promotional backing, without television glamour, and without the kind of management that fast-tracked others toward title shots. Early in his career, he fought in small venues, often on the road, sometimes in hostile territory. Decisions did not always go his way. Close fights slipped through the hands of judges. Promoters hesitated to invest in a fighter who did not smile for cameras and did not soften his personality. He responded, the only way he knew how, by training harder than everyone else. Hagler ran in heavy boots along the cold beaches of Provincetown. He sparred longer rounds than required. He fought left-handed and right-handed until switching became instinct. There was no attempt to craft an image. He was building something else entirely. Durability, control, relentless stamina. At one point, frustrated with the lack of recognition, he legally added marvelous to his name, not as vanity, as protest. If the announcers would not say it, the law would require them to. By the time he challenged for the world middleweight title, he had already fought more rounds than most champions ever would. He had learned not to trust judges, not to trust promoters, and not to expect favors. Every round had to be taken decisively. Every opponent had to be convinced. This was not a fighter shaped by applause, it was a fighter shaped by denial. And when that kind of hunger enters a division, it does not negotiate, it imposes. The fear around Marvin Hagler did not begin with a single punch. It began with the realization that nothing you did seemed to discourage him. Thomas Hearns once described landing clean shots in the opening exchanges of their fight and expecting the usual reaction, a step back, a reset, a blink. Hagler gave him none of that. The punches landed, and Hagler simply continued forward, as if the exchange had confirmed something, rather than threatened it. That was the first difference. His chin was not just durable, it was emotionally neutral. Fighters rely on feedback. When a man absorbs your best work without visible effect, doubt enters quietly. Doubt spreads faster than fatigue. The second difference was his stance. Hagler was a natural switch hitter long before it became fashionable. He could fight southpaw with heavy jabs and straight left hands, then shift orthodox mid-combination without warning. Opponents trained for one look and found themselves adjusting to two. Trainers would study tape and still struggle to simulate the rhythm in sparring. Emanuel Stewart once noted that Hagler did not waste movement. He cut the ring with short steps, closing exits rather than chasing. There was no wild pursuit, just geometry. He reduced space until exchanges became unavoidable. Then there was the conditioning. Roberto Duran, who prided himself on pressure and inside warfare, admitted that Hagler never gave him a moment to breathe. 12 rounds felt like 15. The pace did not spike and fall. It remained constant. Controlled aggression. No emotional surges, just sustained demand. What made him truly unsettling, however, was not power alone. Many men punched hard. Hagler's threat came from accumulation. He broke opponents down systematically, a jab to the chest, a hook to the body, a straight left upstairs. Not always spectacular, but relentless. He did not look for the dramatic finish. He constructed it. Fighters often speak about levels. With Hagler, the level was endurance. If you expected him to fade in the championship rounds, you misunderstood him. He had built his identity around not fading. The danger was not one explosive moment. The danger was that he never stopped pressing forward, and he never appeared tired of doing so. When Marvin Hagler met Thomas Hearns in 1985, the promotion called it the war. Most fights borrow that word. This one earned it. Hearns entered with speed and right-hand power that had dismantled champions. In the opening seconds, he did not circle. He attacked. Long right hands snapped Hagler's head back. Blood began to stream from a cut on Hagler's forehead. For a brief moment, it looked as if the challenger's explosiveness might overwhelm him. Then something happened that every fighter watching understood instantly. Hagler did not adjust backward. He adjusted forward. Instead of slowing the exchange, he accelerated it. Instead of protecting the cut, he ignored it. The fight transformed from a boxing match into controlled violence. Hearns later admitted that he had never experienced 3 rounds like that in his life. It was not simply the punches, it was the refusal to yield. By the 3rd round, Hearns was the one retreating. A short right hand ended it. Not a dramatic wind-up, just a clean, decisive finish. The message was unmistakable. You could bring speed, you could bring power, but you could not break his will. The same pattern unfolded against John Mugabi. Mugabi arrived undefeated, marketed as the next great knockout artist. Young, confident, aggressive, many believed Hagler's long reign had finally met its equal in raw force. Through the early rounds, Mugabi landed clean combinations and absorbed punishment without complaint. But Hagler did something subtler than overpowering him. He extended the demand. The bodywork accumulated. The pace remained unforgiving. Mugabi's offense began to shorten. By the 11th round, the undefeated challenger looked older than the champion. When Hagler finally dropped him, it was less a single explosion than the collapse of resistance. Even Roberto Duran, a master of intimidation himself, could not impose his usual psychological edge. Duran tried to crowd him, tried to test his composure. Hagler did not react. He boxed when needed, pressed when appropriate, neutralized the inside exchanges without drama. Duran later acknowledged that there was no weakness to exploit. And then came Sugar Ray Leonard. Leonard returned from retirement with speed and movement designed to disrupt Hagler's rhythm. The fight remains debated. Some believed Hagler won. Others sided with Leonard's bursts of brilliance. But what matters here is not the scorecards. It is what followed. Hagler did not argue publicly. He did not demand a rematch. He walked away from boxing entirely. He did not retire defeated. He retired unwilling to negotiate his identity. The fear Hagler created was never theatrical. It was cumulative. Night after night, opponent after opponent, he imposed the same condition. If you wanted the middleweight title, you had to endure him first. and very few men were built for that. Marvin Hagler did not trust the system that governed his sport, and over time, that distrust became permanent. He had seen close fights ruled against him early in his career. He had watched other fighters receive promotional backing, television exposure, and quicker paths to title opportunities. Hagler earned his shot the slow way, through rounds and rematches and road fights that offered little margin for error. By the time he became champion, he had already convinced himself that no decision could be left to interpretation. That belief shaped how he fought. He did not box to edge opponents. He boxed to remove doubt. Judges could debate style. They could not debate pressure, applied every second of every round. But that same mentality carried a cost. He kept his circle small. He trained away from noise, away from cameras, away from the social layers of boxing that many champions embraced. While others built brands and cultivated alliances, Hagler cultivated isolation. It protected him from distraction. It also distanced him from influence. After the Leonard fight in 1987, when the split decision went against him, the reaction was not explosive. It was quiet. There were no long press conferences filled with accusation, no public campaign, just withdrawal. He left the United States, settled in Italy, took acting roles, rarely spoke about boxing in detail. When asked years later about the decision, his answers remained measured. But the undertone was unmistakable. He believed the standard he lived by had not been applied evenly. He did not feel robbed of money. He felt denied acknowledgement. For a fighter who had built his identity on self-validation, that distinction mattered. Hagler never chased a comeback. He never returned for one more payday. That absence says as much about him as any knockout. He had entered the sport on his own terms. He chose to leave the same way. The champion who never blinked inside the ring refused to bend outside it. And in that refusal, there is both strength and solitude. So, what kind of middleweight makes champions feel hunted instead of competitive? Marvin Hagler did not frighten opponents with theatrics. He did not dominate headlines with charisma. He did not promise destruction in press conferences. What unsettled fighters was something far more difficult to counter: certainty. When Hagler stepped into the ring, there was no fluctuation in identity. He was the same in the first round as he was in the 12th, the same in victory as in controversy. He did not depend on momentum swings or crowd energy. He created his own rhythm and imposed it without apology. Champions often intimidate with power, some with speed, a few with unpredictability. Hagler intimidated with inevitability. You could land clean. He would still advance. You could adjust stance. He would mirror it. You could survive early rounds. He would demand more in the later ones. There was no emotional leak to exploit, no visible fatigue to encourage hope. Fighters who shared the ring with him often spoke afterward, not about fear in the moment, but about the absence of relief. There was never a second when the pressure dissolved. His reign at middleweight was not built on spectacle. It was built on accumulation. 12 successful title defenses, years of stability in a division known for volatility. And when it ended, it did not fade gradually. It stopped. That final choice, to walk away rather than linger, preserved the image. He remains tied to a specific era, to specific wars, to a standard that demanded resilience without complaint. He was not terrifying because he hated his opponents. He was terrifying because he did not need to. When the bell rang, the space inside the ropes belonged to whoever could endure the longest. And for nearly a decade, that was Marvin Hagler.